Hi, my name is Mary O'Neill. I'm a community forestry specialist with the North Dakota Forest Service. I'm based in a field office in Lisbon. Today I'll be demonstrating some basic pruning principles on conifers. And while I talk, I'm going to walk you around our conifer arboretum we have here at the Lisbon field office. Conifers in windbreaks and in the landscape provide environmental benefits as well as beauty. As you can see here, I've created a little spot for a bird feeder. I've mulched these. These are 3 Siberian larch here, and behind them are Douglas fir. And you can see I've pruned these trees, and I've also mulched the area. I've got some fun little mushrooms my brother made out of cedar logs, so those are kind of fun to have. But as you can see here, the mulch looks really nice. It cuts down on the mowing and it protects these trees here. So that kind of thing you can add to your landscape is pretty easy and pretty cost effective. It looks like I need to feed my birds. Anyway, conifers are often neglected and forgotten after they've been planted. Proper maintenance of conifers in windbreaks and in your landscape will provide maximum benefits and minimal problems. Coniferous evergreens do not often require pruning, but at times carefully planned pruning is necessary for proper tree maintenance practices. Trees in the landscape will often catch large buildups of grass trimmings and other debris, which can restrict air movement. Pruning for clearance will remove these branches, improve airflow for the tree, and will look much cleaner. It will also be beneficial to the long-term health of your tree. The main objective of pruning is to maintain the natural beauty of the tree and to keep it as healthy as possible. Trees not in a typical forest setting need to be managed properly so that they will provide maximum benefits and be an asset to your landscape for many years. The best time to prune is right now. This is mid-February into early spring. Do not prune live branches during the growing season, which is late spring through summer. During this time, the bark is more easily damaged, creating a high risk for potential infection. So as far as tools go, I prefer to use a nice bypass pruner and handsaw. I don't like to use loppers because I just feel like they're kind of cumbersome, but you can certainly use those if you prefer. I've got 2 different sets of bypass loppers or pruners here. This set's got a little bit longer of a handle, a little bit heavier, but really nice tool. This is the same kind of pruner. It's just a shorter handle, a little more lightweight. It's not that nice bypass, so it makes a nice sharp cut. My tools are dirty, FYI, because I've used them recently. I will wash them. That's another thing you want to do, is make sure to keep your tools clean after you're done with them. Wipe them down with a rag and some alcohol, maybe even give them soap and water if they're kind of dirty, and make sure they dry out completely. So as far as saws go, here's a little bit smaller of a saw. This is a Felco, and this brand of these pruners is also Felco. That's a really good brand. You're going to pay a little bit more money for these tools, but it's definitely worth it. So this is a little shorter saw. This one is my favorite saw. I love this. It's a Corona. Haha. Sorry. It's a razor tooth saw. I love this saw. It makes really nice clean cuts. It's very lightweight. It's easy to handle. And to replace it, you just simply unscrew it and replace it with a new saw. So that's really easy to use. For your pruners, you're going to want to sharpen these every once in a while, and they do make sharpeners. But those are my tools of choice that I like to use out in the field. Like I said before, you can certainly use some hand loppers if you so prefer, but just, make sure your tools are clean and sharp and ready to go when you're ready to prune. And don't forget to wear PPE. I have gloves on, and I also have safety glasses, because working with spruce trees, everybody knows they can be a little prickly and a little difficult. So with that, I will get started down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with this branch here. You can see all this grass that's grown over it. And I'm just going to cut this I don't have to be too delicate with this part since this whole branch is going, but once I get to the stem is where I want to be careful. And these, like I said earlier, loppers would work good in this situation too. What I tend to do too is just clean some of this out if I can, if it's not frozen in. And this time of year is probably the time of year you want to be starting to do this. February 3rd today. So you want to be doing your conifers anytime now until early spring. You kind of want to stay away from doing it in the summer because it's working hard to keep the tree alive, and if you damage the bark in any way, it's going to open it up to some injury and infection potentially. So you can prune dead branches at any time though. So I'm going to also remove this one, because this one you can kind of see here too is stuck in the grass. See how much that grass grows up around there? So I'm going to get this out of my way. And any of those dead branches I come across, I'll just clip those off cleanly just to get them out of my way here while I'm working. And this one's another one that can go. Okay. So let's get this guy out of my way. Now this branch I will leave here because it's high enough off the ground where if you're mowing by it, it's really not going to affect it at all because it's off of the ground. So let's see if I can get here. So I'm going to show you the branch bark ridge. You can see here where it starts to just kind of wrinkle or stack a little bit almost. That's called the branch bark ridge. So you can kind of see where that ends right about here, and that's where you're going to want to make your final cut. I'm going to show you the 3-cut method, which is first we'll make an undercut here, and then a couple inches away we'll make an overcut, and then what that does, it just takes that weight off of the branch. So when you make your final cut, it's going to be less likely to potentially strip the bark. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do that, the 3-cut method. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to make my first cut right about here and just maybe go a quarter to halfway through, right about there. And then I'll make my following cut an inch or two away from that. You can see it's right there. See how it breaks away like that? Instead of, it's doing that here instead of close to the stem, so it doesn't damage the stem. So we'll just remove that. And then like I said, I'll make that final cut just right outside where that ridge is. There you have it. Nice clean cut. That should heal over really nicely. Here's the tree we did the demonstration on, and you can see that it just removed the bottom row of branches just to get them off of the ground and to create a little bit of clearance there. I mean, you could certainly go higher if you wanted to. Like here at the Arboretum, I've done quite a bit of clearance because we have, when our mowers come to mow, they have riding lawnmowers, so we need to be a little bit higher. So you can see on these larch that I went up a little bit higher, 4 feet-ish. So you could go up to, 4 or 5 feet if you want, if you need that sort of clearance for mowing. So I did that for these outside rows. And as you can see, as we get further down here, where I haven't made it yet to get those pruned up, and you can see all of the grass growing up in there. And then you can see on this side how much better that looks. So it's strictly your preference. If you want to go in a little bit higher, you certainly can do that. Or if it's your trees are in a little more protected spot, like you can see it's right here in the center. This is the one we trimmed up. You can just do that, those bottom branches, just so things don't get caught up on them. But you can see it looks a lot nicer and a lot cleaner, especially if you're going to be mowing around them.
All right. Well, after those self-made technical difficulties, if you guys have questions in the chat over here, other than can't hear, could you share your screen? You're not doing a very good job. I know after seeing these videos that I need to get some better pruning utensils. I am one of those people that doesn't like to be up on a ladder, so anything to keep me on the ground is a good thing. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in here. Doug or Mary, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Ryan, can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
One thing that we didn't touch on in the video just because of time was frequency of how often you should be structurally pruning your tree. We generally try to visit our trees 2 years after they've been planted, and I know a lot of people, if you're planting shelter belts, you're using elm probably as part of your plant palette out there, and we don't have any hesitation in pruning elm trees every year. And if we had more time and more staff, we would make sure to hit all of our elm trees that are less than 15 years old. Every year they can handle it. They all the cultivars that we were able to plant in North Dakota just grow a ton. So don't be afraid, especially if it's your own trees, to just do a little bit every year. If you're not able to do that, I would say at least try to hit them every 3 years to do some structural pruning after they've been planted.
All right, great. It looks like there's a question from Easton in here. Doug, do the multi-stem species such as Ammer maple get pruned the same way with a single leader, or do you allow more than 1 leader to mature?
I think, you know, you can buy multi-stem varieties of Ammer maple, and if that's the case, then you would keep it as a multi-stem. I know there's Japanese lilacs that are multi-stem and birch, so you would want to keep those as they are. But if you're, you know, trying to grow conservation stock that is a single stem, where you're trying to have a single trunk, then yes, you would initially approach it the same way. And because of the natural structure that tree has, it's not tall, and it's gonna be very decurrent at a very early age, because the mature canopy on a Ammer maple starts a lot lower than a large shade tree would. Did that answer your question, Easton?
Okay, so looks like that answered Easton's question. So I have a question. I've heard kind of multiple thoughts on this, but as far as like maple trees, due to start my video. Due to the sap running in the spring and late winter, is it better to prune those like late summer after they've kind of put on their initial growth, or what are your thoughts on that?
The only reason we are hesitant to prune maple in the spring is because of the aesthetics and the questions we get because of it. From what I'm aware, it doesn't negatively impact the tree if you wait. It's just a little bit unsightly, I suppose. If you have a sap stain running down your tree, you know, it's going to be visible for most of the summer. So pruning in early spring is still good for a maple tree, but if you don't want to see it, then you know, wait till late fall, I suppose, or early winter.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
I'll say a question, and this is just out of sheer curiosity of anybody who's sitting in on this presentation. How many times does it come up in discussions with landowners, pruning timings, as far as like once the trees are pruned, such as the clearance pruning that Mary was presenting on? You know, does anybody ever have those types of conversations with their landowners? You know, when they hit a certain age, or when the grasses start to intertwine in the branches, that they should start pruning? Just people can put it in the general chat session. It would just be really interesting to hear how often that's brought up.
I know one of the most common questions that I get is how much a person is able to prune. Like especially if we get a nice late fall or early spring like we had, and people have time on their hands, they really want to get out and get some of the stuff done that's probably been neglected for quite a few years. So that's one that, and I typically just tell them 25% is kind of what I've been telling them. I don't know. I hope that's what I've heard from certain people, I guess.
That's generally the prescription that you should follow. But again, it is species. Species can have a factor in that. Our elm trees and trees that put on a lot of growth a year can handle a little bit more being taken off the canopy. You know, an oak tree, you don't want to prune probably 25% because it's not going to put on a whole lot of new leaves every year. So 25% is a great rule to follow generally, but there are some species that can tolerate a little bit more annually. And on mature trees, definitely try to stay below 25%.
So So JD just put up a comment. I'm surprised when my producers take care of their trees in general. Pruning is not a common conversation. Does anybody have any comments to that as to how we could start those conversations with landowners, or does anybody see a great need for it within their districts? That would be something else.
I think it's incredibly important to talk about the investment that they're making at the time of planting and what those future benefits that they're hoping to receive out of those trees. And if you're not doing the developmental pruning or structural pruning, then you're potentially shortening the life of those trees and therefore not receiving the highest amount of benefits possible for those shelter belts in those situations. So I think education is, the biggest component. It'd be a lot of work and a lot of communication, but I don't know that, maybe ag producers understand the dynamics that occur out there or how a tree responds to a wound or a large tear out when it's not, structurally sound.
I know we do hear a lot of complaints about storm damage and wind damage, and the farmers and other producers having to clean up after the trees, especially after a wind event. So I think if those trees were a little more structurally sound to begin with, they would probably not have to do as much work down the road. And it looks like somebody's asking for if we could get any handouts. I know this recording, at least it says it's recording, but if there'd be any handouts of these presentations. I don't know, Liz, did we have any of either one of these? I don't remember.
I don't believe I got any handouts for this one, but Doug, I believe you said it's possible to maybe get some of those snapshots that you had on a couple of your slides, and then Mary might have something or some sort of resource that we have down here in our office. I can let her speak to that.
So yeah, I just attached a link to a good document from Purdue. That's where I got one of those images that I think is probably the better of the two. Arbor Day Foundation has great resources. I'm not sure if the Forest Service has put out a publication on structural pruning, but there's a lot out there. Yeah, trees are good. Arbor Day, yeah, all that stuff.
Mary with the 4 posts. That's awesome. And then Doug gave us the other one. So that's good. So hopefully that's a good start for some folks. I guess just from my experience going out in a lot of the windbreaks around the state that we've assisted on, or I've assisted on anyways, a lot of them are those the ground clearance pruning, especially with spruce. So that's one that's really important when they start to get to that mature age, and the smooth brome and some of the other grasses start to mix in. That's very important. And there's also some folks that are starting to incorporate elms back into some plantings. I know I've heard that around the state as well, that there's some folks that are trying that out. And I think Doug's presentation was very good at showing that they're maybe not a tree that you just plant and walk away from. They need a little bit more care. So it's going to be kind of a long haul of taking care of those until they've reached that stage where you can't quite reach them anymore. So that was very good. Thank you. And then Connie actually posted, I just saw this. We have a handout. Oops, sorry. We have a handout we give to our people when they pick up their hand plants. NRCS has a pruning fact sheet for small scale solutions for their farms. That's wonderful, Connie. And then Easton, a lot of the complaints I've heard about storm damage and breaking branches around our area have been more specific to the cottonwood, poplar, and tree willows. I don't know, that is a very common one that we hear. Doug or Mary, do you have any, specific experience with cottonwoods, poplar, willows that might help in those situations?
Nope, they're gonna break. Yeah, it's not it's a great tree because it's gonna give you some coverage quick, but it's just not a strong wood. You're always gonna have breakage, even if you structurally prune that thing. You're gonna have branches laying on the ground. So it's a cost benefit analysis. Do you want the height quick? If so, you're gonna deal with the breaking. So
Mary says she agrees. Her camera isn't cooperating today.
And I think part of the issue with some of the those larger trees falling, dropping limbs into the fields is the way they were planted. They were really close together. The rows were really close together, so they're overhanging the fields more than they probably should have been. And if we can keep them away from the area that they're supposed to be protecting, and then they're dropping limbs, let's say in the middle of a shelter belt, maybe it's not such an issue there.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Maybe do a last call for questions, or if anybody else has any other comments or requests. Well, Doug and Mary, her camera is not working. She's actually in the other room, just on the other side of the office from me. But I really appreciate you guys putting together these pruning videos, because this is a great resource that we can utilize to tell the landowners, especially with windbreaks. And with a lot of folks, I think somebody was saying for the last 16 years they worked for the district, they've never once talked about pruning with somebody. Maybe this will kind of spur that conversation, and we can start to see some pruning getting done out here. Mary's here. So yeah, so thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thanks for struggling through this with me. If you guys want to see an encore, I think I'm hosting the technology for improving plantings tomorrow at 1:15. So maybe go to the other session. All right, I think that's a wrap.
Yep, I will have Zoom open again at 9 a.m. tomorrow if anybody needs to test their Zoom. Also, if you believe that anybody would benefit from tree promotion, please let us know who they are. This is free. It's completely free, and I would love to send the link to anybody who's interested.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see most of you tomorrow. Ta-ta.